Content creators talk a lot about language acquisition, how it works, what it feels like, and things like that in the language learning community. They share their methods, they make materials to help people who are studying foreign languages, along on their journey. And all of that is great. I figured that something we don't do enough that might be a really big help to people who are trying to acquire a foreign language using the methodology that all of us people on YouTube are always talking about is to share a direct, personal story about a time where I remember the exact moment I acquired something or began understanding a new word or concept in my target language, which is Korean. As a brief reminder, if you've never heard of any of this language acquisition immersion stuff before, what I'm talking about here is the input hypothesis by Dr. Stephen Krashen. He's a linguist who's done a lot of work on second language acquisition, and to sum up the gist of what I'm talking about, this doesn't really do justice to his work, but what he says is that we all acquire language in the same way, by getting comprehensible input in a low anxiety environment. Now, in less words, that means we learn language, we get the ability to speak or understand, at least, foreign languages when we understand messages in context. And by doing that over and over again for a long period of time, we become a speaker of the language intuitively. All of those moments of understanding build up an intuition for all the rules of the language that native speakers also have. So in online spaces these days, I think the hot topic is figuring out ways to take advantage of this acquisition device in our brain, to set ourselves up for success by putting ourselves in situations where we can understand messages in our target language over and over again, kind of artificially boosting our speed of learning the language. Most really successful and really serious language learners that I've seen either knowingly did this, or when they hear about this, like later on in their language learning journey, they go, yeah, I think that's what I did. So today I want to share a story about a moment in time that is seared into my memory in which I acquired a new concept in Korean. Hopefully this will be helpful for you, both like in understanding this concept that I'm going to talk about if you're a beginner or intermediate learner, and also if you're kind of not understanding how this acquisition process works in a practical sense, maybe giving an example of it working for me can help you be better at measuring your progress as you acquire your target language. After I tell the story, I'll explain the grammar concept and the vocabulary construction concept that I acquired in this moment. And it may sound easy to you, like, oh, well, duh, that makes perfect sense if you read it from a grammar textbook or a vocabulary textbook. But on the fly, interpreting this kind of stuff when it doesn't really exist or isn't commonly used in your native language is a much harder task than understanding it from a book. This is also something covered in Dr. Krashen's work. I highly recommend you look into some of his talks about, his findings. Anyway, the story. I was working in a kindergarten at this time, a Korean kindergarten though. A lot of the kindergartens where foreigners work in Korea are like all-day English experiences. The place I was working just had English classes for fun. So I was allowed to speak Korean with the kids. I was listening to Korean all day. It was a very mixed language environment, which was really cool for me. One thing I loved to do while I was teaching though was mess with the kids. I think this is one of those instinctive things that we humans know how to do in order to encourage acquisition of any language, even their kids' native language, confidently and incorrectly saying things in front of the language learner to encourage them to correct you, especially if they're kids. If you like pretend to not know what a chair is, and like the kids get frustrated and say like, how do you not know what a chair is? And you've tricked them into like being creative with the language and all that kind of stuff. It kind of pushes away the unfun environment of school and the like, I gotta sit here and learn and whatever. It pushes that to the side and immerses the kids in a situation where they're saying things like, teacher, no, that is not correct. How do you not know this? I also, in addition to goofing around all the time, loved to do repetition. So at the beginning of each class, I would turn on a YouTube music video for children or some kind of children's song, and we would listen to it and sing along. And as we repeated it, of course, we'd end up singing the song along with watching the video. So once the kids got familiar with the song, they started, knowing all the words and they were doing the dance along with the characters or whatever, I would start messing it up on purpose. I'd sing the wrong lyrics and get the kids to correct me, or I would pause the video a bunch of times saying it's over, and the kids would say, no, it's not over yet. The other thing I would do is stand in front of the TV facing the kids. So the TV's behind me, kids are in front of me, and I'm enjoying the song. A quick side note for context here. My Korean level at this point was very beginner intermediate. I had some words that I knew, I had a little bit of grammar that I knew, and I was roughly just translating English in my head to Korean using the tools that I already had. So what I mean is, I was outputting Korean at this point. I was speaking Korean with Korean people and having them more or less understand me, but it was all experimental, and there's a lot of failure in the way that I was saying things because I was just translating English using tools I knew. So back to the story. One day, we were like jamming to, walking in the jungle or something like that, and I pulled out my best trick, which was standing between the kids and the TV and acting like everything was normal. One of the little kids, of course, stands up and says, "Teacher, I can't see the TV." Being the professional goofball that I was prepared for this. Of course, I just turned around and looked at the TV and said, "I can see it just fine." The TV in front of me and the kids behind me, me blocking the whole thing. Turn back to them, "I can see it just fine." "What do you mean? 볼 수 없어?" Then, this very quiet, polite girl who always just sat quietly in class, never spoke up in Korean or English really, at least when I was teaching, she said to me, "아니, 안 보여요." And I remember exactly, it was that moment for me, was like one of those movie moments where there's like a tight zoom on the main character's face, and like the memories are unlocked or the puzzle pieces finally come together and they understand, what's going on. I realized in that situation, what I had said was incorrect. And what she had said was what I wanted to say. I said, 볼 수 없어? Which means, are you unable to see? You can't see, something like that. You are unable to see. And her response was, no, 안 보여요. I realized in that moment that Koreans don't say 볼 수 없다 or 못 보다 to say I can't see. They don't use the grammar form that means unable to when they're talking about this idea. Instead, they say 안 보여요. It is not visible, or it is not seen to me. That word was kind of abstract to me up until that moment, but I specifically remember from that moment onward that this concept just stuck with me. Now, this may not be exactly the perfect example of how Krashen's style acquisition works. What he says is that it takes a long period of time and lots of moments of understanding in order to brick by brick, block by block, build up an understanding of how these concepts work in an intuitive way. But maybe I had a bunch of experiences of understanding this word in context that just like I wasn't really paying attention, but I still understood. And this was just kind of the first time that I did understand. That may have been what happened. But the point is, I really distinctly remember that from that moment on, I had a good intuitive sense for when passive verbs were more natural than any other grammar form. So here's an example of how this like ripple affected out into my life here in Korea. Doors suddenly made sense. I know that sounds ridiculous. What I mean is like the elevator door, the subway door, the bus door, things like that. I realized, oh, this is why when I'm listening to the announcement of the door closing, it's not saying 닫습니다, which I thought was what was happening with like a low quality speaker. They're saying 닫힙니다. There's a totally different word, and these different vocabulary words that I had run into and thought, why is it spelled that way? Why is there this other word? Blah, 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 blah. It all made sense. So from this little moment on, this little story with the kids, I realized, I became aware of at least, the fact that I was much better at intuiting Korean grammar that was clearly just flying over my head before. Anyway, I hope this story was interesting and helpful for you. Have you ever had a concept like this stick without any real like conscious study of it? Please share in the comments if you do. I have a few more of these that have come to mind that I'm gonna record and share, and I would love to hear your stories and share them here too. Okay, that's it for today. I will see you in the next one.